At 76, Jim Carter no longer raises his voice. He does not need to. Silence has learned to listen to him. From the outside, his life appears composed, dignified, even gentle. A man known for restraint, for gravitas, for characters who carried authority without cruelty. Yet behind that stillness lies a private ledger, not of roles played or awards earned, but of names. 5 names. 5 moments where trust did not simply crack, but collapsed. Forgiveness is often spoken of as a virtue, as relief, as closure. But Carter has learned something colder with age. Not all wounds are meant to close. Some exist to remind you who you once believed in and who you should never believe in again. These are not stories of scandal. There are no shouting matches, no tabloid confessions, no dramatic confrontations. What hurt him most arrived quietly. Decisions made in rooms he was not invited into. Loyalties withdrawn without explanation. Promises that dissolved the moment they became inconvenient. Time did not erase these moments. Success did not soften them. If anything, age sharpened their edges. Now, looking back across a lifetime of stages and sets, Carter allows himself a rare honesty. He names the 5 people he has never forgiven, not out of bitterness, but out of truth. Because some betrayals do not fade. They wait, and they echo. Long before Jim Carter learned how to command a room, he learned how to observe one. He grew up listening more than speaking, watching adults choose their words carefully, or not at all. In those early years, trust was something earned slowly, almost cautiously. Once given, it was rarely questioned. Theater came into his life not as an escape, but as a discipline. It taught him structure, patience, and respect for unseen labor. Rehearsal rooms became places of quiet solidarity, where unspoken agreements mattered as much as written contracts. You showed up. You prepared. You stood by one another when the lights went on. These values settled deeply into him. Carter believed that professionalism was a form of loyalty, and that loyalty, once broken, was not easily restored. He carried this belief into every collaboration, every ensemble, every shared silence before a curtain rose. But as his career expanded, so did the gap between what he believed and what he encountered. He began to notice small fractures, a role promised, then quietly reassigned, a voice dismissed because it was too calm to fight back, a decision made for the good of the project that left someone expendable in its wake. At first, he excused these moments as misunderstandings. Youth allows for that generosity, experience does not. By the time he reached his later years, Carter understood something fundamental. The deepest wounds are not caused by enemies, but by those you assumed were standing beside you. The rise did not arrive suddenly. It came in layers. Rehearsals that stretched late into the night, stages that smelled of dust and old curtains, audiences that first learned his name slowly, syllable by syllable. Jim Carter did not chase fame. He waited for it to recognize him. When it finally did, it came with applause that felt earned. Roles of authority followed. Men of restraint, figures whose power lay not in volume, but in presence. Directors trusted him. Producers relied on him. On set, his calm became a stabilizing force, a quiet center around which others moved. Success for Carter was never intoxicating. It was measured, controlled, almost cautious. He smiled for photographs, bowed to the crowd, returned home without celebration. The lights dimmed, and he sat alone with the same silence that had always accompanied him. Yet beneath the surface of recognition, something began to shift. The industry he had believed in, built on mutual respect and shared effort, revealed a colder logic. Decisions were made without explanation. Loyalties bent under pressure. Faces that once met his eyes now looked past him, already calculating the next advantage. Still, he endured. He told himself this was the cost of longevity. That survival required patience, not confrontation. He remained professional when others became strategic. He stayed loyal when loyalty stopped being fashionable. But the cracks widened. A project he had helped shape moved forward without him. A promise made privately was undone publicly. Praise was given in interviews, while exclusion happened in meetings he was never invited to attend. Each success carried a shadow. the sense of being valued only when convenient. From the outside, his ascent appeared complete. Awards, recognition, a career others would envy. From within, something had begun to erode. He learned to smile with precision, to listen without responding, to file away disappointments where they could not be seen. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, he began to understand that the height he had reached was also preparing him for a fall, not from fame, but from trust. Because it is often at the summit, not the beginning, that betrayal finds its moment. The rupture did not come with noise. It arrived quietly, almost politely, which made it harder to name and impossible to forget. There was no confrontation, no dramatic argument to mark the end, just a door that stopped opening, calls that were no longer returned, decisions announced after they had already been made. One day, Carter realized he was being thanked publicly for a loyalty that had already been dismissed privately. This was the moment something shifted inside him. He remembered standing alone in a dim corridor, the echo of applause fading behind a closed door. Inside that room, plans continued without him. Outside, he understood that trust, once broken, rarely announces itself. It simply disappears. He did not protest. He did not accuse. Silence had always been his refuge, and now it became his shield. But something essential was lost that day. Not a role, not a position, but a belief. The belief that integrity was enough, that patience would be rewarded, that loyalty was mutual. From that point on, he began to count carefully. Not achievements, not years, but names. Because some wounds do not bleed, they settle. And once they do, forgiveness is no longer an instinct. It becomes a choice he was no longer willing to make. 5 names, 5 moments when silence became heavier than words. 5 faces that time never managed to soften. Jim Carter does not list them quickly. He does not enjoy the act of remembering. Each name is approached carefully, like a fragile object that can still cut if handled without care. The first was someone he trusted instinctively. A friendship formed early, built in rehearsal rooms and long conversations after performances. This person knew his doubts, his insecurities, his belief in loyalty above ambition. When the moment came to choose, they chose advancement over honesty. Carter was not attacked. He was simply left behind. The betrayal was quiet, almost elegant, which made it worse. What hurt was not the loss of opportunity, but the realization that trust had been used as a stepping stone. The second arrived as a surprise. A collaborator he respected, someone who spoke often about fairness and artistic integrity. Together, they had shaped ideas, shared visions, imagined futures. But when pressure came from above, principles dissolved. Carter watched as his words were repeated by someone else, his contributions slowly erased. In public, there were compliments. In private, exclusion. It taught him that admiration does not always include respect. The third wound cut deeper because it came from proximity rather than profession. Someone who shared blood, or something close enough to it. Expectations were never spoken, yet deeply felt. Support was assumed, until it was withdrawn at the moment it was most needed. There were no harsh words, only absence. A chair left empty. A silence where reassurance should have been. Carter learned then that family can wound without intending to, and that those wounds often take the longest to heal. The fourth was not a single person, but a collective force, an institution, an audience, a system that praised him when he fit its image and distanced itself when he did not. Years of work were reduced to a single narrative, simplified, controlled. He became visible only in the way others chose to see him. The betrayal here was public, subtle, and deeply isolating. He understood that public affection is conditional and that it can vanish without explanation. And then there was the fifth, the one he speaks of last, the one he avoids naming for as long as possible, because the fifth is himself. He does not forgive himself for staying silent when he should have spoken, for mistaking patience for dignity, for believing that endurance alone could protect him from disappointment. He remembers moments when he sensed the truth, but chose comfort instead, when he ignored the quiet warnings in his own chest. This is the hardest forgiveness, because it requires no confrontation, no apology from another. Only acceptance. Carter understands now that he allowed certain wounds to grow by refusing to acknowledge them. That silence, once a strength, became a hiding place. And that by protecting others from discomfort, he denied himself honesty. These 5 names remain with him, not as obsessions, but as markers. They shape the way he trusts, the way he listens, the way he stands alone without resentment, but without illusion. Because forgiveness, he has learned, is not forgetting. Sometimes it is simply remembering and in choosing never to repeat the same mistake. At 76, Jim Carter no longer seeks resolution. What he seeks is clarity. The past does not replay itself loudly. It returns in fragments. A line of dialogue remembered too clearly, a corridor bathed in weak light, a voice that once promised certainty and never came back. These memories no longer burn. They rest, heavy but calm. He has not forgiven them all, and he has stopped pretending that he must. In the quiet of his present life, Carter understands something age teaches slowly. Forgiveness is not a moral obligation. It is a personal threshold. Some cross it, others choose to stand before it, not in anger but in truth. What remains is not bitterness but lucidity. He knows now who he is without illusions. He knows the cost of silence and the weight of words left unsaid. And he knows that survival sometimes means carrying the scar instead of erasing it. As the light fades, one question lingers in the stillness. Is forgiveness a gift we owe others, or a burden we unfairly place upon ourselves? And if some wounds never close, is it because they still have something to teach us?